Thank you, all of you that are tuning in to the show via the Spreaker app, SoundCloud. A lot of you listen to us over on YouTube. And some of you just do it the old-fashioned way. You head on over to our website, thechtonsports.com, and click on the listen link in the upper left-hand corner. Very much appreciative of you guys listening in each and every week on the show. The number to call in, 347-237-5539. Again, the call-in line is 347-237-5539. All right. So a lot to talk about this week. We are past the national championship game, and that was the talk of last week. We had a special. James and I covered the game in Atlanta a couple weekends ago. We were there. I talked about it on the show last week. If you missed the show last week, it's okay. Admittedly, it's probably one of the worst shows I've done maybe ever. No excuses, though. If you missed it, don't worry about it. I'll recap some of that stuff here tonight. Kevin Kress was sick last week. He's feeling better now. Maybe NyQuil, DayQuil. I don't know. Hepatitis shot. I don't know what exactly it is, but he is feeling better. Maybe it's just something naturally cleared up, chicken noodle soup or something. I don't know. We'll ask him here. He'll be joining us here as he does every week here shortly, and we'll definitely be recapping a little bit shortly of the national championship game. Also, the divisional NFL playoff games that we just saw this past week. I know a lot of people missed their picks, and that's okay. It's something that happens. It's perfectly normal and legitimate. And then we will preview this weekend's host of shows or host of games for the conference championships. Again, this week. Also, I want to get a little bit into the NBA. I don't think it's quite peaking yet where people are ultimately interested in the part of the regular season that is interesting to them. It's usually like the first couple weeks, right around Christmas, and then I'll explain the rest of that later. And also, I think what we see here in the month of January with the Cavs and the Warriors, they're predictable. I'll explain more later. Also, this Saturday, two major events this Saturday. So sports fans, you want to tune in. The earlier of the two events is the 93rd Annual East-West Shrine Game. Tune in. The amount of highly productive, talented NFL players that are not only starting in the NFL, but excelling in the NFL this season as rookies played in that game last year. And I see a tremendous amount of talent that'll be in there this week. I will be there tomorrow at the practices, and I will I'll get you some live action. So make sure you're following me at Matt Long Sports. Follow social media for the show at the CHT on Sports. I will have some stuff over. Those of you who don't know what music.ly, music.ly, it's an app. It is essentially, a lot of people have asked me, what is it? What is it? It's pretty new, but essentially it is Vine. As you know, Vine was bought by Twitter and really is no more. Okay? Vine died because the creators weren't able to monetize on Vine. Musically, Lively allow that. Okay? Those of you that love Snapchat, hey, Snapchat people, if you're listening, if you own IPO, with Snapchat. If you invested in Snapchat here in the next few months, if you're not starting to see improvement in their ability to allow creators on Snapchat and people on Snapchat to monetize, and their ability to sell ads on Snapchat, sell it. Because it is essentially what Vine was. It doesn't stay there. Vine looped and was always there, whereas Snapchat, it's gone in 24 hours. So, is there a want or need for it? Yes, there is. It does improve on news cycles and stuff, but as an IPO, as an investment tool, as for creators, it's going to lose out to Instagram. Facebook has Facebook Watch coming out, and it's going to allow you to monetize, as well as Musically and Lively. They allow you to monetize there as well. So because of competition allowing creators to monetize, Snapchat could end up being obsolete, and people will lose interest in it. So just a word of advice. Still, if you're in social media or anywhere, you still want to be able to have an account there. I always recommend having accounts everywhere, even if you rarely use it. Like, I just plug music.ly, Musically. I have an account there. I haven't even posted yet. So I'll get some posts out there. Another one, if you are a podcast person, and if you're listening to this show, likely you are, there's an app called Anchor. It's essentially all it is. It allows you, and anybody, average Joe, if you want to make a podcast on the spot, you don't have to have equipment and stuff like we do for this radio show. We do for other podcasts and stuff. It's your phone. You literally hit mic. Boom, you're live. Or boom, you're recording. And then you post it. The same way you would do if you were in a text message or WhatsApp and you hit the record button and you recorded what you wanted to say and then sent it. It's the same thing, but it's an app, and that recording is a podcast instead of just a little recording to a friend in a message because you were driving and you didn't want to text, which is responsible, clearly. So just a heads up on Anchor as well. Keep an eye out for that. If you're a podcast person, definitely look into Anchor. So we're going to get into some sports talk. Let me welcome in my co-host. He is an accomplished author. He has 3 books out. The P.K. Frazier novel series, which you can just go to Amazon right now and buy it. And I implore you, if you're able to do it. Just buy the whole series. He has a 4th book he's working on. He'll talk about that as well. Some of you might have heard of him before. He's been on several other radio shows, Lou in the Morning, most recently. But he is my co-host, Kevin Crest. How are you doing tonight, Kevin?
I'm doing well. I've recovered. It just I was telling my wife yesterday, just good, clean living that I'm able to recover so quickly from the flu. So that's my story, and I'm going to stick to that. So
it's the itis.
That's what did it.
You got some of the itis. Is that what it was? Put some tussin on it. Isn't that how Chris Rock?
Yeah.
Little. Put some tussin on it.
Just recovered naturally. No medicine. Just let it run its course. But it was debilitating for 3 or 4 days. So, but back now and got a chance to watch a lot of sports and ready to talk about what's going on in the world of sports right now.
Well, I know the last time you were on, when we talked about kind of a preview, we were talking about the playoffs a little bit, and I said then I kind of thought that Clemson might win against Alabama, but after spending some time, I ended up picking I ended up picking Alabama as my choice there. And then ultimately on the preview show, we did on Sunday, we did a Sunday special the day before the national championship game. James and I from Atlanta, I actually, because I was leaning Georgia up until the point I hit the floor of Media Day. And when I hit the floor of Media Day, I was like, Alabama's going to win. I don't know. I just had this overwhelming gut reaction feeling that changed it. I was like, Alabama's going to win. And Sunday I was talking about it. I said, listen, basically what they have to do is exactly what Tua did. But the problem with what was missing in there, it wasn't how to do it. I wasn't sure who would do it. So, I said the quarterback would have to do it. I didn't have the confidence in Jalen Hurts to do that with his arm. And obviously Saban didn't think that either, so he made an adjustment at halftime, and Tua came in and tossed the ball around, took advantage of deep passes, screens, and was able to establish the run game off of that. So it was kind of counterintuitive to what Alabama had done all season, and Georgia just didn't look prepared for that. Vice versa, Alabama didn't look prepared for Fromm. They didn't think that he was as polished and as ready to play in a big game as he was in that first half. It's just the halftime adjustments kind of made a big difference for both teams in the game. What did you see with the national championship game?
Well, first of all, Nick Saban's an outstanding football coach, and he showed that by preparing his freshman quarterback to go in the game at halftime. It's no secret that he was concerned about his team's inability to pass the football against Georgia. Georgia was going to take that away. I mean, Kirby Smart was his defense coordinator for 8 years. I mean, he knew what Kirby was going to do, and he did it. And then Saban, in his contributing, I mean, there's no secret why the guy has won 6 national championships. He's the best coach in the business. He prepared and he coached. That's what he did, and I think that was the difference in the game. That was such a toss-up game. The last 3 years have been so close. I mean, Clemson could have won 2. Alabama could have won 2. Georgia obviously could have won. Last Monday night, they could have pulled that out as well. It was that second touchdown pass that Tua threw to Ridley, where you couldn't even see him in the end zone, and he threw the ball, and the guy catches the.
That was luck.
Comes out of nowhere to catch that ball. That was an amazing play. Now, you can call it what you want, and whether it's luck or not.
It was going to who was it? The running back. It was going to the running back. That's who he was throwing it to. It just Ridley happened to come across and saw it and caught the ball. I think it was Scarborough.
Well, all I know is, from that camera angle behind the quarterback was an amazing angle, and of course the read on the winning play, and Tua talked his way through that play. This kid's exceptional. He looked that safety off, and he knew what he was doing. He looked him off. He took a couple steps to the middle of the field. Guy's wide open. He makes the play. Touchdown. I mean, listen, if you thought Alabama was scary before, they've never had a quarterback that could really throw the football.
Yeah.
They are scary good now. Jalen Hurts, if he stays, is most likely going to be an H-back or a running back or something else, right? Because his days of starting quarterback are over unless Tua gets injured. Because you could see it.
Yeah, but he's done at quarterback.
What a classy, but I got to say this. That kid Jalen Hurts couldn't have acted and behaved more classy than he did. under the circumstances. He was coaching up to the entire time, which leads me to believe, and I'm not I am a conspiracy theorist in most cases, but it leads me to believe that Satan's kind of had this in his hat for a while. Under his hat for a while. That this kid's really good. He has plans for Hurts. As an athlete, I'd like to see Hurts stay there because I think he's just a great athlete. Now, as an opponent of Alabama, I'd prefer him to transfer because you don't want that much talent in Alabama. But I just thought it was an outstanding football game. Thought all the players played really good football. The officials, for the most part, stayed out of it, which I thought was exceptional as well. But that was a great game. You had, for the first time, we actually had good football games all the way through the playoffs, because in years past we've had dogs in the semifinals and blowouts, but there were no such things this time. That Oklahoma-Georgia game was ridiculous. That one was another classic. And of course, I'm on the record. I picked Clemson and Oklahoma in the first round, and of course, they were gone by that time. And it was a toss-up for the final for me. But I think it was good for college football. I think it was good for the playoffs. I think the committee was shown to have made good decisions. Obviously, Ohio State and the Big Ten, what they did in the bowl games, can make a case. Oh well, they could have been there, but those games didn't count. The committee did a good job with the 4 teams they picked. Those are great games. You could say, well, Clemson got a little bit blown out against Alabama, but they didn't really. Alabama only scored a couple of offensive touchdowns in that game. That was a close football game. It was a 10-6 game until a couple of turnovers by Clemson. So, yeah, I thought it was great. Can't wait till next year. I know there's already talk about perhaps expanding it to 6 or 8 teams. We'll see. The way it is works just fine. It's exciting. It adds a lot of excitement and credibility to the regular season. I'd like to see 6 teams myself.
Yeah.
And the way I'd like to see it is, I'd like to see the first games, the first 2 games played 2 weeks after the conference championship games, right before the bowl season starts. That's what I'd like to see.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't really add any time to the season, right? You still keep the same time. The top 2 teams get a bye, and why not? The NFL gives teams buys, and it needs to work.
So essentially, the
I
one
don't see a
thing,
problem with that.
well, the thing is, like, the tough part of remedying something is because here's the thing. With Alabama this year, we talked about it the week before last when you were on, and LaVon Kirkland joined us. That was an awesome show. That show you guys should go back and listen to. I'll plug that out again. That was a good show. Last week was not a good show for me. We should have just not done a show last week. I think that's how disappointed I was with last week's show. But just to give people an idea, before Alabama played Clemson, all right, and smoked them, essentially, their last game was on November 24th in the Iron Bowl. They played no games in the month of December at all. All right, plus almost a week off at the end of November. On top of so they had a total of 37 games. 37 days, 37 days off before they played against Clemson. And in that time, Clemson played an extra game, right? Or Georgia played an extra game. So this is talking about going into the national championship game. Clemson played an extra game. I had to play against Miami. Then Georgia had to play obviously they had to play an extra game. They had to play in to the national championship game. They didn't get a bye to it, to the playoffs. So they played the SEC champion, had to beat Auburn. Again, that was a hard-fought game. Then their first round of the playoffs, they had to go all the way to California, play another tough game, double overtime. They lose an extra day of prep because they have to fly back. Alabama had to go drive 6 hours, from New Orleans to Tuscaloosa. I mean, half the kids are from the area anyway, so, they didn't lose a lot. They're not losing the same amount of preparation. So they got an extra 8 days of rest before playoffs, and then they got an extra day of prep because of the travel Georgia had to take. So, Georgia coming down from Athens and Alabama coming from Tuscaloosa. I mean, yeah, it's in Georgia. It's in Atlanta. It's considered kind of a home game almost. Well, it was because Georgia was a higher rank team. They were a higher seed. They were a third seed. But, it really wasn't because it was very easily travelable for both teams. I mean, this whole playoff, basically, Oklahoma isn't in the South, but it's about as damn close as you can get to the South, being in the South. So Oklahoma, Alabama, Georgia, and Clemson, so the Carolinas. So that you got basically a very regional playoff, and that's more so what the committee wants to look at. Also, the Big Ten not being in. A lot of people felt Ohio State, a team that won their conference, played 9 conference games, played tough home games out of conference, and they weren't rewarded for doing that. They were kept out. So a lot of people feel that they should have been in. Now, the final rankings of their final poll, I think with Alabama, Georgia, having the final 8 teams in the ranking. I'll go down those teams here. I think if you had an 8-team playoffs and UCF being in that top 8, I think that would have been a much better look, because you're getting other regions and stuff involved, and that's kind of what they're drawing from. Having Penn State, Ohio State, UCF, Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, all involved is something that seemingly, from what I'm saying, again, and this is, again, I think 6 teams is better, but if you take the 8 best teams, I know we've always kind of argued if you didn't win your conference, a lot of times you're kind of, maybe you're arguing should a mediocre team be in there. I mean, 4 teams, are there 4 teams that really deserve a national championship each year? I mean, you could argue if 4 or 6 do. Usually 7 and 8 don't.
Yeah, I could make the argument for 6, and I agree with you. We've had that conversation before on how far do you go? I mean, how many teams can actually win it? And I think when you get beyond the 6, now this year, 7 was Penn State and 8 was USC.
Yeah.
So I could make an argument this year, but it's kind of rare because there was a lot of parity this year that we didn't have in years past. But I still say going beyond 6, you dilute the product.
I also don't believe in conference champions getting automatic bids. Because I think that kind of because if you look at this year, top 6 teams: Alabama, Georgia, Oklahoma, Clemson, Ohio State, and UCF. I think those are the
State.
teams that should have been in. Those are top 6 if I'm going Associated Press. That's Associated Press.
I can't. I cannot see a path for a UCF. Now, UCF, unfortunately, this season had a game with a Power 5 school canceled because of the hurricanes, right? They didn't get a shot at Georgia Tech. And so, if UCF had beaten Georgia Tech, not that Georgia Tech was great this year, they really weren't as good as they've been in the years past. They were pretty good. You can make a case that, okay, I got you. You beat a couple Power 5 teams, you've got a shot. But when you look at half of the schedule for the AAC, and I know they've got some good teams, Houston and Navy and Memphis, UCF, USF. But when you get beyond that, the schedules are weak. I mean, they're just flat out weak. And if you take a team that UCF would have to unseat to get into the top 6 would have been Penn State. Okay? And you take Penn State's schedule as a whole, and you compare it against UCF's schedule as a whole, they're not even comparable. I mean, they're not. I mean, UCF ran the table. They're a good football team, and who knows? Maybe they could have taken on Alabama and given them a game. That's not my point. My point is that you can't take a team from the AAC without them playing 3 Power 5 teams in their non-conference, which unfortunately they can't get them scheduled. So I'm not. It's 2 different arguments. I'm not arguing that UCF wasn't a really good football team. That's not my argument. My argument is, based on their record and who they play with, they're deserving to get into a playoff. I can't see my way to getting them into the playoff. I mean, an 18 playoff would get more political. An 18 playoff would be, okay, 5 Power 5 conference champions, 2 at large, and maybe you bring in, the top a group of 16, right? Like you do now for the New Year's Six. But that then becomes a different scenario than what the committee's charged with right now. The committee's charged with taking the 4 best teams, regardless. Now, remember too, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, and we talked about it 4 weeks ago when we were on before. The conference, a lot of these differentiating factors come into play in tie-breaking situations. And I'm going to make it. I know. Who was it? Was on disagree with me, but the fact is that Ohio State had 2 losses. Alabama had 1 loss. In the committee's eyes, there was not a tiebreaker between Alabama and Ohio State because Ohio State had 2 losses. One of them, an extremely ugly loss against a mediocre football team. So I don't think the committee ever actually was splitting hairs between Alabama and Ohio State at all. I'm not sure that was who they were looking at in terms of splitting hairs, because there were 4 one-loss teams that were clearly at the top of the rankings, and I don't think it was a tough decision. I think they made a good decision. If you go to 6, the reason, Matthew, that I feel we have to expand it is because we're leaving out conferences. The Big Ten conference as a whole was a very solid conference. They had really good teams. And they got left out of the playoff. So for me, that's the reason I think we need to expand it to 2 more teams. Because, under that scenario, Ohio State definitely would have been in the playoff. We could argue who number 6 would have been. Would it have been a Pac-12 champion? I don't know how they would have gone with that. I mean, that's supposition that I can't.
Okay, let me throw something at you real quick.
Right, but
let me throw something at you real quick. And now, because I know I'm only doing this because you watch a shit ton of football, and a shit ton is a real amount people. It's a real amount. That's precisely amount of football that Kevin Krests watch. A shit ton. One day, hopefully, I can get to a half a shit ton of watching football. It's tough. I have younger kids and a wife that likes to go do stuff.
Yeah.
And spend time with me. Jeez.
Well,
but okay, let me throw this out there.
Let's quantify your term.
Okay.
Okay, but I can quantify your term. Quantifying your term is 10 to 12 college football games a week is what I watch. Okay, and sometimes more, but that's what I watch. So that's to quantify your term, and so I think I'm qualified. I watch as much as anybody. I think it's because it's humanly possible to watch that. So go ahead. So throw it at me. What you got?
Okay, again, this is the hypothetical of a hypothetical. Now, had last year, or even had last year when the stories and stuff were breaking, the last 2 years, had the Big 12 actually put their big boy pants on and brought on Memphis, UCF, USF were three of the teams that they wanted to bring on along with Houston. Okay, so had they brought those four teams into the Big 12, like they said they had intended on doing, this I want to look at what would if they were in the Big 12 conference. Okay, just again, this is complete hypothetical, and obviously there's obviously we have to add some hyperbole to this and imagination, but I just want to present this. So they have Georgia Tech from the ACC. That's an out of conference, so they would still play that game. We don't know the outcome. Conference USF, FIU, we know the outcome. They played the Big Ten, Maryland. We know the outcome. And then two of their conference games, we know the outcome against Memphis and USF. Those would have been in-conference games, still been Big 12 in-conference games. So you're telling me out of the next 7 conference games, looking at Kansas, Baylor, Texas Tech, Iowa State, Kansas State, West Virginia, Texas, Oklahoma State, TCU, and Oklahoma, 7 of those teams, again, because they've already played 2, so they play 7 of those teams. You don't think that UCF could have beaten 7 of those teams?
Okay, so let's follow your scenario. So now that means that the Big 12 goes from 10 teams to 14 teams.
Yes.
None of which are 12, by the way. So there's a math issue here, but we won't get into the mathematics of that because we all know that the Big 10 has
14,
12 teams. So anyway,
14.
We won't get into all of that, but 14. But so okay. So a lot of it would have had to do with excuse me, how the Big 12 divided into 2 divisions. So let's just say I'm going to speculate on what those divisions would have looked like. Let's say an East and a West, given the teams that they brought on. So you would have had UCF, West Virginia, USF. You've got to throw some weird scenarios in there. Kansas, Kansas State, and I don't know, Houston or Texas into one half of the league. Then you've got Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, blah 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 blah. Right. So UCF would have to have played, and let's say that they stayed with the 9 conference games in the Big 12/14.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would have depended. It would depend to me who UCF would have drawn from the other half of the league, right? Because you've got scenarios in the ACC, for instance, like not this year, but in 2016, for instance, Virginia Tech dodged Clemson and Florida State from the Atlantic and ended up in the conference championship game because they had a favorable schedule. And I'm a Virginia Tech person; everybody knows that. But I'll be the first one to admit that they benefited from that schedule, right? Because they didn't have to play those teams. Okay, so when we start to speculate on and the same thing happened with Wisconsin in 2016, faced a brutal schedule in their non-conference and had to play Michigan, Michigan State, and Ohio State in succession. Remember that in 2016?
Yeah.
And of course, they got the other side of the draw this year. They got a more favorable schedule and ended up in the conference championship game. Anyway, so that has a lot to do with how these conferences work. And so, I'm going to give a caveat that let's just assume that UCF would have to have played at least, okay, and let's just figure out on this, would have to have at least played Texas, Oklahoma, or Oklahoma State, and Kansas State. Let's just say that, okay, and West Virginia, because it would have been that. I'm assuming West Virginia would be in their half of the conference. Otherwise, why do the whole realignment? Because you want to get the teams closer together, right?
Yeah.
And I would say that depending on where those games came in the schedule, because there have been situations where teams have to play all those games in a row in the Big 12. We've seen it before, right?
Mm-hmm.
We saw last year, I think it was 2 years ago, West Virginia had to play Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Texas, and Baylor when they were good, all in a row. And running that table is really difficult. So I'm going to say this, Matthew. I'm going to say that, yes, UCF, given time, could have beaten all those teams. But I would say that in the course of a conference schedule, it's highly unlikely, and we've seen it because there were no undefeated teams this year. It's highly, highly unlikely.
Well, other than UCF, there was no other
table.
There was no other undefeated teams.
Yeah, but
yeah, I know what you mean.
But I'm talking about Power 5.
Yeah.
Okay, or in the playoff situation. Okay, so I'm just going to say from a physical perspective. Now, don't get me wrong. Alabama, Auburn, even Auburn, as good as they were, couldn't fight it off because it just got too much for them. Physically, those game, right? So I'm going to speculate that, and from my experience of watching these games, that UCF would have lost one just because of, number one, travel, number two, the physical demands, the back-to-back-to-back games against top teams. They probably would have lost one. I mean, even Oklahoma, as good as they were, right, dropped one this year. And so, to Iowa State, who, by the way, ended up, this is a wrong term, falling apart at the end of the season. I think Iowa State got physically beaten up. They did really well, but the physical demand
they lacked
of that
depth.
schedule,
of course,
it lacks depth, and I don't see any difference for UCF. Now, the saving grace was, I think UCF could very possibly have won the eastern half of the Big 12 and gone back in against an Oklahoma, most likely, in the conference championship game and given them all they could handle. I don't know. I'm just speculating. But in that case, UCF would have earned their way in.
Yeah.
Right? Because of the schedule and everything else.
But can you say, but just kind of looking, just looking at that, so just really we're not doing, again, obviously this is all speculation, but you've seen a lot of their games. I know now to the point that people have seen them play Memphis twice. They played USF, and they dominated Auburn, a team that beat both Georgia and Alabama. That's the grounds right there that they went undefeated. They beat Auburn, who beat the two teams playing for the national title. That was their grounds for claiming a national title for them because they went undefeated and they beat the team. Again, I'm not giving a shred of legitimacy really to that national championship, but that's the basis of the grounds because it's and again them saying, "Hey, we're national champions." Because obviously they're the best team of the next tier, just outside the Power 5. They're the best team, clearly. So that's why, another reason why too. But they really, again, my whole point is like, if the conference realignment happened, I don't think that that UCF wouldn't have been able to do what they did this year. Had they played Oklahoma State, TCU, or Oklahoma, I think those are really the only three teams in the Big 12 that really could have stopped or tested them. I don't see them losing to TCU and Oklahoma State. I think that something similar to what happened with Auburn kind of would have ended up happening there, because Memphis is very similar to Oklahoma State, and Auburn in some of what they do is similar offensively, just that Oklahoma State has a much better quarterback. So I don't think either of those two teams ultimately would have beat them. I think it would have come down to Oklahoma. Which
let me give you a caveat here, though, Matthew, because you know how I feel about bowl games. That game meant a whole lot more to UCF than it did Auburn, and teams prepare for bowl games.
I don't know about that, because
let's go. Hear me out. Hear me out before you interrupt. You just hear me out.
Yeah.
And my nephew, by the way, plays in the University of Arkansas football team, so I've got some stuff here. But when you get into what I call a meaningless game, and bowl games are meaningless, it depends on the makeup of your football team. If you have a senior-laden football team, you're basically preparing for next year. You get 15 practices to prepare to get a jump start for next year. That's what you get, and that's the bonus of a bowl game. Now, obviously, Scott Frost stayed around at UCF for one reason only, and that was to win that bowl game. That was to prepare those players to win that bowl game, because he's not around next year. He doesn't give a crap about what UCF looks like next year or in spring practice. He was there to prepare that team to win that bowl game. Now, I don't know what Gus Malzahn's goal in the bowl game was. Gus Malzahn signed a 10-year extension at Auburn before the bowl game. That bowl game had no bearing whatsoever on his coaching status. Number two, were your seniors given some time off or rewarded for a good season? I mean, it's no question. Auburn had an outstanding season. Now, that caveat being taken, I want people to understand. I think UCF had an outstanding football team, and I think lined up against any of the top four teams in the country, the float in the playoffs, UCF could have given them a game. Now, could they have stood up depth-wise in a game that mattered? I don't know, because we didn't see that, and it's mere speculation. But Scott Frost put a very good football team on the field against Auburn. They won the football game. But there's so many variables in this when you start speculating. And by the way, I think the UCF athletic director, good for him. He had a lot of fun with it. Why not? This team did an incredible thing. It was Boise State-ish, right? Boise State won a couple of those bowl games against Power 5 teams, right? I mean, I loved it, and it's good for the sport. It's good conversation. But to think that at this point that a group of six team could get their way into a 14 playoff, no way, unless something really strange happened, or unless they happen to schedule three really good Power 5 teams and run the table. But the problem is the back end of those schedules are so weak for the non-Power 5 conferences that it's very difficult for the committee to make a case for one of those teams. And UCF they've had as good a case as anybody, because Houston didn't finish the deal 2 years ago. Remember, they were on the verge and lost a couple games, so they didn't get to make that case. UCF had a pretty good case, but they had that game against Georgia Tech canceled, and I think that was a big influence. I think if UCF had gone in and handled Georgia Tech, we might have a different conversation. Okay, we really might, especially against the Georgia Tech team that's very difficult for even good Power 5 teams to defend. It's a tough
Now,
thing to defend.
see, this
And
year,
so that would have been a great game to see,
yeah,
right?
I think again, it would have been interesting. I would have liked to see, UCF in it. Again, I don't think them smashing Georgia Tech makes much difference, because at the end of the day, it wasn't. If it would have been Clemson, that would have made a difference. If it was Miami, it would have made more of a difference.
Yeah, they're not.
Probably
Yeah,
not
they're
enough.
Not with a 14 playoff.
Yeah, not with a
Not with a
14
14
playoff. They basically said, "Hey, listen, we can't say Alabama, who is everybody's favorite, from week 1 to week 15 to win a national title. We're not going to take you over them. Again, then that means we also have to take you, an undefeated non-Power 5 team, but in this case, it would be Oklahoma and UCF making it out of the Big 12 under this process." And so they're not going to have two Big 12 teams in a conference that doesn't play defense. There's no Pac-12. The Pac-12 champion doesn't make it in. So you're taking other major champion, and you're picking it as a non-Power 5 to go in over them and the favorite. So I don't think, regardless of what they do on their existing schedule, outside of actually being in the Big 12, had they been in the Big 12 last year and done the same thing again, and I was kind of looking at the divisions, I think that it would be, the West would be Texas, Oklahoma, TCU, Houston, Memphis, Texas Tech, Baylor, and then the East would be UCF, USF, West Virginia, Iowa State, Kansas, Kansas State, Oklahoma State. So it's kind of the states versus the non-states, I guess, as funny as that is. But I think that essentially they would and probably could beat all 7 of those teams, and I know they beat 2 of the conference on the regular schedule because they came over from that from the AAC. But again, all the fantasy stuff aside, the committee will not put in a non-Power 5 team. That's what they said. With a 4-team playoff, there is no chance of you as a non-Power 5 making it in, because I don't think UCF was in a situation like Boise State was in years before. Boise State played this. It was more video game like offense, and the defense wasn't as solid. And Boise State in the game that they went in, and I think it was when Oklahoma they beat. It's not like they went in and it was really like they manhandled them. It's just like a game that they got caught off guard. But that's the thing, is like Auburn got manhandled. Like 5 sacks in the first half, and it wasn't like the Auburn players weren't trying to win. They're trying to make it a game, because they came back in the second half and made a game of it. But UCF was able to hold them off and show that they were the better team. Again, I don't think that was necessary, because it was a situation where it was a team that had everything to show. And they're thinking, it's like the coach literally has a different job. And he comes back. Again, I said he was going to do that. Even before he was announced as a head coach at Nebraska, I said he will go to Nebraska as the head coach. This is what he's going to make. He will go back to UCF and he will coach the bowl game. And Nebraska won't have a problem with it. That's exactly word for word almost what I said. That's what happened. And again, I gave them the edge in that game, not because I thought Malzahn and his squad was going to sleep on UCF. It's because if you look at that game, Frost managed the clock and timeouts well. Him playing to get a field goal at the end of the game showed that, hey, we're not here to joke around. We're here to win a football game. Here's your notice. and going down and getting a field goal to go before they went into halftime showed that. So again, it just said, hey, listen, we can take this with with about a minute left in the half, and we'll go down and score. We're going to go down and score on you. That's going to happen. So, now let's deal with it. So that's again, Malzahn got outcoached by Frost in that game. So again, I look forward to seeing what UCF and USF and Memphis and Houston decide to do in the future. They're clearly the top 4 teams in that conference. It's going to be interesting to see what they're going to do with alignments. Is they're going to move other pieces around? Because when you have 4, because you argue. We talked before. With Memphis again, end of the season, top 25. UCF, obviously ranked number 6 in most poll, and USF being right up there too. That's 3 of those 4 teams, and a lot of top 25s at the end of the season. How many other conferences are doing that? Power 5 conferences. So it kind of showed with the top of their conference, they can compete with any other conference. So that's kind of like because before it was the Big East, they had a BCS bid, but when the Big East was dissolved as a football conference and it's just a basketball conference, and the AAC had to be formed, and they lost some teams, they gained some new teams, in that realignment, they lost the legitimacy as a power conference. So all of a sudden, they go from being a power conference to some realignments, and now they're not. But clearly, with the 4 teams that they have at the top, they've shown that they should be considered in those walks. Now, whether like Conference USA, Sunbelt, and AAC decide to realign to make a more powerful conference, a better schedule, I don't know. Again, the future can only tell us that. But I don't know. This year was, again, one of those seasons. It was a rarity.
There's a broader issue here, and because there's still another shoe left to drop in this entire discussion, and it's one you've been intimating at, is the Big 12 with 10 teams is an anomaly in Power 5 football structure. And as far as I'm concerned, there is another, I guess for want of a better term, realignment coming in college football, because we've got some schools that can play at the big boy level if given the opportunity. And one of those is Houston, which has shown over the course of time to be able to compete. UCF clearly, with the position of the athletic director and the building the stadium and taking that direction, is another one that wants to play with the big boys, right? That can do that. South Florida is another one that with their situation there, and Tampa's what, the 13th, 12th, 13th,
11.
14th biggest market in the country. 11, somewhere in there. Depending on which reading you want to take. That's a big market, right? And I think USF could benefit. They haven't to date built their on-campus stadium, but it's sitting up there in Tampa Palms. Excuse me, in Temple Terrace, would certainly be a great location to draw people, because you can get to it pretty easily given where their campus is. So you've got some of those schools. I'll name a couple others. San Diego State, for instance, right? That region is a huge metropolitan area, lacking a Power 5 presence in football. And so, you have some non-Power 5 metropolitan areas. Miami has University of Miami, but you got you got Lane Kiffin down there and FAU just chomping at the bit. That team has got bowl games. So you have 5 or 6 that you could name. Memphis is one as well. Obviously, they've got a stadium. They've got good geography. They can go to a lot of conferences. The ACC right now has 14 schools with the 15th quasi-member in Notre Dame. If they ever do get Notre Dame in the fold, they're going to need to add a school. Who's that going to be? You've got West Virginia sitting out there as a real outlier in the Big 12. Do they go somewhere else in the Big 12 backfill with 3 or 4 other schools? I don't know. So that whole the thing you brought up is and you have the Pac-12, which obviously could do some expansion as well. So I think that's the next shoe that has to drop in this whole scenario, because then I think the playoffs could follow suit. If you end up with, instead of 5 Power 5 conferences, you end up with 4, right? Let's say the Big 12 disbands and those members go elsewhere, or they go to 16 teams, which would take the top teams from probably the AAC and Conference USA or Mountain West, whatever, right? I mean, any of those. You could find Boise. You could find Boise State in the Big 12, right? You could find Houston. You could find UCF. You could find a number of schools there. So to me, that's still something that's going to play out over the next 3 or 4 years. Now the Big 12 has maintained rather vigorously that they are where they want to be, but that makes no sense to me, and it makes no sense economically, because Texas has all the money in the Big 12. Oklahoma's pretty good. Oklahoma State has T. Boone Pickens, but when it comes to who really drives the revenue in that conference, and is Texas, and that's fallen by the wayside the last couple of years because Texas hasn't been the top team in the Big 12. But if you watch Texas play at all last year, under first-year head coach Tom Herman, you can see signs they're on the way back. Let me tell you, I watched 8 of the 12 Texas games, and I can tell you they are on their way back in a big way. They are going to be heard from in the Big 12, and that's going to then shift that economic factor back to the University of Texas. So I think they're going to want some more schools and try to figure out how to get more revenue in some of these bigger markets, because when you think about it, Oklahoma State, the same market. They're an hour away. Okay, there's no market advantage there. From a television perspective, it's all the same market. Kansas brings nothing because they suck. Kansas State, in the middle of nowhere. They lost Missouri out of the Big 12 to the SEC, which brought into play Kansas City, St. Louis. So they really need a big market. I mean, Texas A&M and they lost Texas A&M to the SEC. That brings the Houston market into play. They don't have Houston, which makes no sense to me why the Big 12 doesn't have Houston, given that Houston's the 4th biggest television market in the country. So they've done a really bad job in terms of marketing their product to the big markets. It's all small market stuff. Texas is a national brand, Oklahoma's national, but from that perspective, they are woefully behind the other conferences in terms of generating big market. I mean, the ACC went after Boston College for one reason. It's Boston, right?
Yeah.
The ACC now has their games on the Northeast Sports Network, which covers everything north of New York City, which is owned by Madison Square Garden Network. So, the Big 12 has not done what they need to do in a conference to get these markets. I mean, the ACC has, they've got Louisville, they've got stuff in Kentucky, they've got all of North Carolina wrapped up. They've got Clemson in South Carolina, they've got Georgia Tech in Georgia, which is Atlanta. They've got Miami, they've got Florida State. They've got their market blanketed with teams. Virginia Tech, they own that entire region, right? The SEC doesn't even have an inroads into any of that, into most of that region. And so, what is the Big 12 thinking from a business perspective? What are they doing?
Yeah,
it's a no-brainer. Why not get why not get Houston? They don't want Houston because they go recruiting-wise. I got a message for the Big 12. Houston's already eaten their lunch recruiting in Houston. Why not at least get some of the benefit of the television money from those recruits that are already taken away from you? That ship has sailed. They're already getting the athletes there. So why not grab it, right? And hell, why not go to Florida? I mean, why not?
Get those markets in there. The thing is, like, again,
right? I mean,
the move makes sense. You have Tampa's the number 11 market in the country. Orlando is number 16. Miami's number 18. So that's what you go after. You go after Orlando and Tampa, the two largest markets in Florida. You got Houston, the number 5 in the country. So now you just brought in 3 in the top 20, and then you add in Memphis, which is, I think they're not very high. I think they're like 30s. But still, on top of that, you're adding in 3 of the top 20. So obviously, but Memphis has a quality program. And again, even with changes at head coach, they're still producing winning football, So it's going to be interesting to see if they do that or not. Because if they pillage those away, the AAC is kind of, they're kind of lost. There's not much that.
But you're going to keep your coach. But here's the thing. If Houston's in the Big 12, Tom Herman doesn't go to Texas.
Yeah.
If Memphis is in the Big 12.
Well, I wouldn't say that. He would go. He would have went.
Well, he may or may not. That's a different story. But he might or may not have. If Memphis is in the Big 12, does Justin Fuente go to Virginia Tech? It's a tougher decision.
I got a little bit of breaking news. Okay. FAU, the athletic director at Florida Atlantic University, the guy that just got done taking a risk and hiring Lane Kiffin. A lot of people say it's a risk. I don't think it was a risk. Pat Chung, all right? Pat Chung at FAU has been announced that he has accepted the same role at Washington State University, and he will be announced tomorrow.
Huh.
Interesting.
Not a surprise.
Interesting.
Let's see, that's just our point, though. If some of these programs were in bigger conferences, you wouldn't have ADs and coaches jumping to the Power 5. That's where they want to go, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where they want to go. So, I think that's it actually, where did the AD for Washington State go? He went to
Nebraska.
Okay. So, not a surprise. Now, he's the guy that linked Lane Kiffin. He's the guy that linked Lane Kiffin to a big extension. No matter, I'm not sure what that extension really means.
Yeah,
whether that was more publicity or actuality. Yeah, it's a 10-year, but what kind of buyout and how much guarantee, all that kind of stuff. But so, what does that mean for Lane Kiffin? I don't know. I think Lane Kiffin needs to stay there. He's doing a new wrinkle in on me, but Lane needs to stay there for another year or two just to solidify his reputation as a coach. But that's it's not a surprise. Washington's had to get an AD from somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to take some, turn from someplace, so that makes sense. So back to my point, though, and that actually makes my point a little bit, is a lot of these schools are chomping at the bit to get into the Power 5 conferences so they can keep their coaches. I mean, even the guy at Chris Peterson from Boise State went to Washington because Boise, in the Mountain West, right? If Boise had been in the Pac-12, where they probably belong, frankly, would he have made that move? I don't know. Maybe he would have, maybe he wouldn't. But it wouldn't have been the no-brainer it was when he made the move.
Mm-hmm.
That's my point on that. And I really think we need to get. I think we need 5 16-team conferences. That's what we need. That's 80. That's 80 division. That's 80 Power 5 schools. That's where you want to be. Because then you can make the case. If you get to that point, you can make the case that a Power 5 conference champion is a pretty legitimate conference champion. I mean, they'd have gotten to a 9-game. You'd have 5 conferences with each with 2 18 divisions, right? You'd play 7 games in your own division and two games outside your division. 3 non-conference games. Ostensibly 1 or 2 would have to be against another Power 5 school. Now you've got an elite, case for a 6. You have a case for a 6-team playoff. 5 conference champions in a large team, and there you go. You got it. You don't need a committee. I mean, you really don't. You've got a system. So anyway, but that means Notre Dame has to go to the ACC in football.
Yeah.
You can't have that. You can't have that system with Notre Dame being a 1-team conference the way they are currently. Maybe 4 years down the road, and maybe they make a special case that Notre Dame's the ACC, but they still get their own TV contract. Who cares? Texas has their own freaking TV contract for the most part. They have their own network, right?
Yeah.
So
it's not insurmountable.
Forget from the.
Yeah.
No. You can make it happen, and that's the business side. And you and I both talk about the business side and the competitive side on this show, right? We both have an interest in that. My point is this conversation is more on the competitive side of things, with TV markets and those kinds of things. The business side is, who gets their piece of the pie from a revenue generation perspective, and hey, more power to Notre Dame to generate that themselves. I mean, I have no problem with that, and I'm an ACC guy. But Notre Dame's an ACC team in every other sport but football. I don't know if people realize that. Some people do, some people don't. But Notre Dame is a member of the Atlantic Coast Conference in every sport, except football. All the women's sports, all the men's sports, the whole deal. They're an ACC member. And the only reason they're not in football is because of that TV contract.
Yeah.
And you don't think smart people can figure that out? I think they can. Right? I think ultimately they can. To date, it doesn't matter. I mean, and by the way, Notre Dame plays 5 ACC football games a year. They're only 3 games short of a full conference schedule at the moment because ACC and SEC are the 2 teams that still only play two conferences only play 8 conference games. So Notre Dame is, what is that? 62.5% ACC. I mean, they're that close. I mean, it's that close, Matthew.
Yeah.
To them being a full ACC team, right? I mean, come on. In all intents and purposes, they are. And so the only thing that has to happen now is you've got to expand. You've got to expand the Pac-12, and you got to expand the Big 12. And
the Big 12. The funny wouldn't it be funny? I mean, because the Big 12 has to be careful. If they screw around too much, I mean, Texas could just leave. Texas, I mean, hell, SEC could bring them in. I mean, any conference. I mean, the SEC could bring them in. The ACC, if they wanted to say, hey, listen, we're just going to go over. We'll be the big dog in the AAC, and we'll build the AAC and say goodbye to the Big 12, because that's just it.
Well, 5 or 6 years ago, well, don't you remember that the Pac-12 had a tentative agreement with Texas? This was before the Longhorn Network, before Pac-12 Network, before some of that. This was predated that. But Texas was for all intents and purposes going to the Pac-12, and I guess the Big 12 presidents put the kibosh on that in some way, shape, or form. But Texas was headed there, which would have really swung the balance of power, which probably would have been the end of the Big 12 as we knew it, which is, I think, why they ended up not finalizing that deal.
Letting them have that deal.
Right, because
basically, I'll look the other way on this
the wayside, so
if you don't run away. But looking back then, they weren't thinking that, Texas would fall from grace as they have.
Right, that's correct. And but they're on their way back. They've got Shaka Smart as their basketball coach. He's bringing that program back. You've got Tom Herman at head football coach. I think he's gonna right that ship. So the question is, does the rest of the Big 12 see Texas as an anchor program in the Big 12 as a positive anchor? Or they see them as an anchor program that's bringing them down because they can't generate enough revenue without them? It's a real interesting dynamic there, kind of a love-hate relationship between the Big 12 and the University of Texas. And so they're kind of geographically at a disadvantage. The ACC and SEC and Big 10 and Pac-12, they all have kind of their territory staked out, right? You know what they are. You got a couple outliers. I mean, you got Rutgers in the Big 10, but who the hell cares about that, right? I mean, but the Big 10 has that upper Midwest. The Pac-12 has the Pacific Coast. The ACC has, they share some footprint with the SEC, but not really, right? Because they share a little bit of Florida, a little bit of Georgia, a little bit of South Carolina, but the ACC basically is South Carolina, North Carolina, North. So they all have their little geographic footprint. And then you got the Big 12 sitting down there, and they have their own footprint, but there's no population mass where they are except for the state of Texas. And so, and they've been scarfed. I mean, A&M's gone, Missouri's left. I mean, and who knows, the Pac-12 could come calling to Oklahoma State anytime. They really could.
Yeah.
I'm not sure Oklahoma would go, but right. So they're vulnerable, and I think they're going to continue to be vulnerable until they either do one of two things: until they're absorbed by the other conferences, or they shore up their own conference. And right now, they haven't done either one. So, it's anybody's guess what happens there. But I don't think their future is strong the way maintaining the status quo.
Yeah.
The other conferences can maintain the status quo and be just fine, right? The Big 12 cannot.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't believe that. I may be wrong, but I don't believe that.
Well, yeah, that's what, again.
Both from a competitive standpoint and business, and both ends, right? Both ends. Because they don't share revenue equally like some of the other conferences do, because Texas takes their own.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's a tough situation.
Yeah, they're definitely their situation. They're definitely in a pickle, and I think behind an 8 ball of making something happen. And I think they felt some of that squeeze. So that's last year. That's why they in the off season they were trying to make a push for this season. That they move those teams in, and that's just it. They didn't do that. So it's kind of like a question. Looking at it, are they willing to do what they have to do to shore up the conference? And it's definitely going to be an uphill battle moving forwards. Have them I think they're sorely mistaken if they think having Oklahoma in the playoff this year, or seeing that TCU had rebounded. Or Oklahoma State was in contention the last couple years, thinking that is enough to really move the needle. It's not. Like I said, the AAC has just as much of an argument with their top 4 teams as the Big 12 does. And like I said, if I'm going through this schedule, we're doing an East-West or a North-South, it'd be hard for me to say that UCF doesn't get through a Big 12 schedule and could potentially have came out the champion of that conference, based on what way we've seen them play this season. And they could have. So that's the thing. Is like they definitely have to do something. They have to make some moves. And the smartest move is to make a move for UCF, USF, Memphis, and Houston to bring them into the conference. They don't need those. I know they say Cincy, and bring in Connecticut because of the media markets. Listen, bring in the better football teams. You got the hold on. The Memphis.
Nothing.
Yeah.
And by the way, let me be clear here, Matthew. We're talking football right now, right? We're just talking football. Okay. Yes. We could talk other sports, but I want to make sure for the sake of people listening, we're talking football here, for the most part, in these conference alignments. We're talking Power 5. We're talking big time football. I know there's all other sports to consider, but for the sake of this discussion, this is all about football.
And just if we're just talking, and even if you want to go to the business side of it, I know a lot of people will listen to us. Maybe you are a college fan for basketball, and we're getting close to your time of year where everybody becomes a college basketball fan for a month and a half or so. We do the same thing. So we'll start talking about it closer we get to March, and where it ramps up, becomes more relevant. But at the end of the day, even powerhouse programs like Duke are spending significant amount of monies to improve their football program because they understand. Kansas, the only reason they want to be relevant in all sports money-wise, that's why Jayhawks have a football team. Not many people feel like they're a Division I opponent, but nonetheless, they're there. And whenever they can figure out, maybe they find Mangini again to come back. I don't know what they're going to do there. The guy they had there was his first year. I don't see any sort of improvement. Like literally, Eric Mangini is the only guy that's ever had success at Kansas, like in probably my lifetime and your lifetime, Kevin. So that's 2 lifetimes, and your lifetime is like twice my lifetime almost. So,
no, but you're right. I mean, the fact is that these programs get to a point where they say, we're better than we think we are, and therefore you're not good enough anymore. That's such crap. I mean, that was one of the worst moves. I mean, I know Mangini wasn't God's gift. I mean, he had some things he did wrong, but the fact of the matter is, he had Kansas contending, believe it or not, to go back, contending for Big 12 titles.
He had them ranked number 2 in the country.
He did.
This is a team that people literally defecate on. It's like a win. I mean, when Prairie View looks at it, we could beat Kansas. Like when 1AA teams are like, we'll have a fun game. It'll be competitive. We'll play Kansas. Yeah. Like, know.
It drives me nuts. I mean, and I'll lift your own school up there. Nebraska is Let's try now. Now, I will say this: if Scott Frost cannot win at Nebraska, no one can win at Nebraska.
Yeah.
Right now, because that guy, okay, he was a great hire, and not to mention the fact of what he did, in the bowl game and down the stretch. If Nebraska is not relevant again in a couple of years, then they're not going to be relevant again for a long time, because they got an alum with success elsewhere that can come in there and do some things. So Nebraska should be able to do something. And I'm not, when I say relevant, I don't mean winning 5 national championships in 12 years. I don't mean that. That's not what I mean. All right, because no one, if you set your standard of performance at an Alabama level, no one's going to make that, right? But if you guys, if Nebraska could become what Clemson has done in the ACC, for instance, the last 8 years under Dabo Swinney, playing for titles, that's where you want to be. And I think Nebraska can get there in the West, because I think they can. I really do.
Okay.
The team you got to beat is Wisconsin, and that's doable.
So here's a funny story. In 2014, 2015, I had on, he was a former Husker friend of mine, on the show a couple times. Michael Booker played for Atlanta Falcons the last time that had been to a Super Bowl. He was on, and he said his prediction in the next 5 years. He said, I predict in the next 5 years, Nebraska will win a national title, and it will not be Bo Pelini. Again, this was only a few games into Bo Pelini's season. That was his last season. A lot of people didn't know if he would get fired or not, but he said Nebraska will win a national title in the next 5 years. Bo Pelini will not be the head coach. The head coach will be a Husker. So essentially, he predicted 3 years ago that essentially Scott Frost would be the head coach of Nebraska. And within 2 years of him being there, he would win a national title. That's essentially what that prediction was. Because me and him, he didn't say Scott Frost on air. We talked about it off air. That's what he was talking about. He was talking about Scott Frost. So that was his prediction. Now, after seeing UCF this year and seeing what Scott Frost meant to Oregon his last year there, again, they went to a national championship his last year there. He had a quarterback that he coached, he was the offensive coordinator for, won a Heisman. So he obviously, we can see he knows how to coach. Like you said, I know a lot of people have echoed that same sentiment. If Scott Frost cannot win a national championship at Nebraska, no one can. So I'd like to see what after his first season, next year. So that would say not this coming season, but the following season. So not 18-19, but 19-20. In 2019-2020, he predicted national champions will be Nebraska. That's what his prediction was 3 years ago.
What?
And now.
Was he on the show with us earlier this year as well?
No, he
was on with us earlier this year after the.
No, Michael hasn't been on.
Oh no, we had on
in a couple of years.
We had the guy from Nebraska that does the publication.
Yeah,
Adam Nation. Yeah, we had
Adam
him on.
Carricker.
Well, I would temper the enthusiasm a little bit, only because it's so tough. And this is coming from a Virginia Tech person who, we wallowed in mediocrity for 3 or 4 years as Beamer made his exit. I would say I can see Nebraska, number one, winning the West, the Big Ten West next season. I can see them with that talent level, with and with them just being coached up by Scott Frost and his staff. And I can see them contending for a Big Ten title in a couple of years, but the Big Ten East is just so stacked. You have Ohio State and Urban Meyer. You have Penn State or James Franklin. You have Michigan. I'm not sure how long Jim Harbaugh is going to be at Michigan. I predict he's going back to the NFL, but that's just a me thing. But still, that's a good football team. Michigan State, nothing to be sneezed at, right? You got Mike Bobo at is he at Purdue?
Yeah.
You got a team there in the West, but I think Scott Frost, if he can put a fence up around Nebraska and go out to neighboring states that are traditionally Nebraska, fans and states, get over into Colorado, get down to Kansas, get over to Iowa, get into Missouri. I mean, I think Scott Frost is going to have that program back on top of the West pretty quickly. I really do. The question is, what he does in the championship game against a team from the East, because if that's Ohio State, that's always a tough task. Penn State, whatever. But I think the expectation should be rather high. To throw national championship out there for an expectation of any coach at this day and age, with all the other factors involved, is a really big task for any program, whether it's Nebraska or USC or Miami, right? The traditional place that have had national championships before is a difficult expectation to strap a new coach with, especially one like Scott Frost. But I'm sure he's going after it. But it's from a fan base perspective. Wow, that's a tough expectation to meet.
Yeah, again, I don't want to put those kind of expectations. I'm just saying it seems, looking at all the pieces standing back, it feels more doable now. And I just thought it was a crazy prediction. And it's like crazy. It's like, because you look at Nebraska under Bo Pelini, and you could tell that, they were a good football team. They weren't elite. You didn't really see them winning national champions, but you saw them putting out entertaining football, winning 9 or more games a season. So that's the thing. It's like Nebraska fans want to get back to winning titles. So to make a prediction in 5 years, and it's a former Husker coach. So the thing is, like, the former Huskers, like you rack down your list of former Husker coaches, and actually there's quite a bit of former Huskers that are coaches. Even if like, I mean, you don't even have to leave like just this time zone I'm in right now. There's several.
Let's take that a step further. I think that the model now for a successful college football coach used to be kind of a character. I mean, remember Steve Spurrier and Bobby Bowden and those kind of guys.
Clowney got a bad arm.
They had that personality. Huh? Yeah,
he's talking. Now Clowney got a bum arm.
But let's look who's getting it done now. It's Nick Saban. It's Urban Meyer. Jimbo Fisher, even though he's kind of a good old boy, he's pretty much all business, right? Dabo Swinney's probably the closest that we have to the old school, but when you get past that good old boy exterior, Dabo Swinney he's a CEO kind of guy. He runs a program, right? And you look at the new young coaches, the ones that people are talking about, the Tom Hermans now at Texas, Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma, right? I mean, you look at those guys and you go, wow, these guys are managers. These are guys that run a program. And so, I look at Scott Frost the same way, right? He's the new breed of that kind of guy. Justin Fuentes at Virginia Tech, who retained Bud Foster as the defensive coordinator. That's a CEO mentality. That's not a football coach mentality. A football coach mentality would be, I want my guy here, right? I want my guy. No, he realized the value of the people around him, and they pick and choose who they're going to keep. So it's very much a management role. And so I think that's the kind of – Bo Pelini, referencing him, he had great talent. That guy could recruit the crap out of the Midwest. But, boy, was he a train wreck on the sideline, man. He just didn't exude the kind of confidence you want, right? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And the fan base, and what's really more important, listen, these are $100 million operations, Matthew.
Yeah.
If people don't want to give money because the coach is a whack job, you're not going to be successful. Now, the reason Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State can still be who he is with that mullet and the whole deal is because they don't rely on donors.
No.
They've got their guy. They've got Boone Pickens funding the program.
And
Gundy
is an alum. He's one of them. He's a Cowboy.
Right. Right. And Mike Leach can get away with stuff at Washington State because, number one, Washington State's out in the middle of nowhere. Number two, the expectations are zero at Washington State. When he came to the program, they were the worst team in college football, arguably one of the two or three worst anyway. And so those two guys stand out as guys that can get away with being kind of flaky. But anymore, that doesn't work anymore, right? You can't be flaky or perceived as flaky and be successful. You have to be with it together. And I think that's what's going to be Scott Frost's attribute he brings to Nebraska after, 3 or 4 coaches that just couldn't grasp it. And obviously, listen, I'll go back to Virginia Tech. Why do you think Frank Beamer was so successful at Virginia Tech? He was a Hokie.
Yeah.
He was one of them. He was one of us, right? Scott Frost is one of you. How could he not get it? He was a quarterback. I mean, he knows what it takes to face that pressure. What is it, Nebraska? When's the last time they didn't have a sellout? Was it the Civil War?
Somewhere right around there.
They sold out somewhere around there, give or take. Right?
We were in a state during the Civil War.
One of those wars.
I think it's the French and
Mexican.
Was it
Nebraska played football.
The French and Mexican War or something like that.
Yeah, they lined up in red and they shot people, and that was Nebraska football back then. But my point is, it's a unique place. It is a unique place in college football. There's no question about that. It's one of those places. You go all the way back to who was the
Bob Devaney.
Bob Devaney, Tom Osborne. I mean, there's a history there. There's a culture. There's a culture of that, and so I think Scott Frost gets that. I think that's going to be very helpful to the Cornhusker Nation. It's a lot what Urban Meyer brought back to Ohio State, right?
Yep. And okay, so
and you can't question his success there.
Now I want to segue into something still related. I think, so my opinion, that Nick Saban is on his way out of college football, and he's going to retire here pretty soon. And again, obviously, when you're 60, he's 60, 66, 67 years old. Obviously, most people 66.
65, I think.
Yeah, so he'll
be 66 before next football season.
He's thinking about, he's closer to the end of his career than the beginning. We know that. He's past the midpoint. He has 6 national championships, 2 different schools. I'm not saying he's going to go to the NFL, but I think he's leaving Alabama here pretty soon. And this is what I'm basing this on, because normally when people when they retire from a place that they've been at for a long time, or people that that they know they're dying. Some traits that you normally see are things like this. They spend more time on little things, which Nick Saban has done a lot more throughout towards the end of his career. A lot of that does come with maturity and experience. They also become more sentimental. Now, Nick Saban seems to be grumpy in a lot of these press meetings, but I think we had a really good moment with him at Media Day, and because James asked the question in the sense that, hey, that you're so tough, you're so hard on everybody, but they say there's a softer side to you. Does that come when you're off the field and away from the game, or do you ever? How does it mix together? And he was basically he reworded and says like, I'm hard on him, and he kind of was thinking back and like because the way James framed the question is like, are you always an ass or a jerk to people, always coming down on them, and harping on them about everything, just unbearable. And he kind of sat back here and thinking, I kind of sound like a bit of a monster, a bit of a raging beast here, and I'm not that. And he stepped back and was like, hey, listen, I don't think it's I'm tough on him. It's just I have high expectations out of my coaches, out of my players, and I let them know that I have these high expectations. But I'm not hard on them. I'm not. He reworded it in a way, but it was more of a sentimental moment where he's like, I'm a person. I'm a grandpa. I'm not this guy that the media makes me look like I am, and I think some of that sentiment came out. And then lastly, they start to give things away or help people advance, prepare people that they like for promotion or moving on up, or they start giving things that they have here. Here's my watch, I got this for Salesman of the Year or something like that. So yeah, I think we see that because each and every year his assistants, like this year, Brian DeBall, he prepared him. He helped prepare him for the interviews for the Bills' offensive coordinator position. Again, he's the Bills' offensive coordinator. Jeremy Pruitt, he helped him prepare for his interview for Tennessee. Again, they were thankful that Jeremy Pruitt even took the phone call, probably, at Tennessee at that point, but helped him prepare for that. Moving on, Lane Kiffin, he left. FAU, obviously a good coach, did well there. Kirby Smart, so he loses his offensive coordinator. Even Sark, if you really call him his coordinator, he was really only his coordinator for a game. He was a administrative assistant or quality control assistant before that, but he was part of the team. He was involved in a certain way, but still, it was he's done a lot to help people move and not necessarily better his situation, because now he has to go and find new people to come in and coordinate the offense, coordinate the defense. Those are very big and significant roles with the company. That's like saying, the president has to go out and find a new chairman of the board and a new CFO. I mean, the very major portions of the company, very critical portions of the company. I mean, it's not easy to do that. And most schools fight tooth and nail to keep their assistants around. And the Alabama assistants are obviously compensated well. But still, a lot of them seem to cycle in and out. And he's been helping them more in recent years. So I don't think he would leave them bare-boned or in a worse position, because I think he has a quality relationship with the school because he's meant so much to them. Boosters aren't going to think anything bad. I mean, you win 5 national titles there. He came 10 years ago? 5 national titles in 10 years. I mean, obviously nobody's upset about that. He's won 6. He's won 6 altogether. So it's not. They're obviously very favorable of him there, and he wants to keep quality relationships there. But that's just it. I think he's on his way out because now he probably wants to go focus on being a grandpa. He likes fishing. And believe it or not, he prefers being in his house in South Florida than he does in Alabama, in Tuscaloosa. I mean, that's a funny thing. I mean, why would you want to go see the beautiful ocean and be on a boat and fish when you could be in Tuscaloosa, Alabama? Not to say anything's wrong with that, but I'm just saying, if you have a choice between the two, unless you're from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and you have tons of family there, a booming business or whatever, even if you have a booming business, you're probably still wanting to go out on a boat and fish in Florida. I'm just saying.
Well, there's a lot of speculation on where he's going or what he's going to do, and obviously none of us know that. But his age is not in his favor in terms of moving to the NFL or back to the NFL. Who brings in a 65, 66-year-old coach that had a couple of stints in different positions in the NFL? I mean, what's his run room? I mean, obviously, if you're a team that you think can win pretty quickly, like the Giants, okay, with Eli Manning has a couple more years, and their roster's pretty good. I mean, you get Odell Beckham Jr. back, and that defense is pretty good. If you can get somebody to just come back in and exert some discipline and you get the team playing well, that's one thing. But he's not going to a rebuilding project. I mean, he's not going someplace where they have lots of holes to fill. You got Arizona, but Carson Palmer's retiring, and that just doesn't feel right to me. And I think Nick has. I think Saban might have. I think he might want to see this last recruiting class through and then be done. Right? I mean, he'd be almost 70. If I was him, I'd want to see what this Tua kid can do. Right? I mean, I want to see how good they can be. I mean, they lose very little from this season. They lose all the guys they usually lose. I mean, they lose. They always have 7, 8 guys taking the draft, but that's normal. But can you imagine this Tua kid lining up at quarterback with Jalen Hurts running around back there in some capacity? How do you game plan for that? All of a sudden, Tua goes out wide, and Jalen Hurts goes up under center in a wildcat formation, and the kid's won 26 or 28 college games as quarterback, and you go, holy crap, what do I do with this? I mean, think how daunting that's going to be to opposing defensive coordinators. How do you game plan for that? That is if Hurts stays. But Hurts has no future in the NFL as a quarterback. He has a lot of NFL future as a running back, receiver, tight end, H-back. You name it, right? You name it. Hell, he could probably be a dynamite safety as well. I don't know. I mean, the kid's a freak athlete, right? So just think about, if I'm Saban, I'm going, man, I want to be able to do something with this because he's never had that. He hasn't had that before. He hasn't had a kind of quarterback. This kid could win the Heisman Trophy at quarterback. When's the last time you had an Alabama quarterback in the Heisman Trophy discussion? It's been like Ken Stabler in 1968.
Well, A.J. McCarron was.
I mean, it's been. He was okay. He was in a discussion, but he's not what you think about when you think about a. So it's been 50 years, okay?
Yeah.
So now he has one. But I don't know why Nick Saban would go anywhere right now. Just play out your string there. You've got. I mean, obviously, his motivation, I think, would be to beat Bear Bryant's 5, right, or 6, right?
6.
Get the 7th net, and where does he have a better chance to go than that? To do that than where he is. It's where he is. I mean,
yep.
Why would you go somewhere else? I mean, no school's come close to that kind of excellence in the last 35 years since Bear Bryant left Alabama. So, why? I mean, I think a lot of it's because the media wants something to talk about, and we're that media. We're there. We're among that group. But at the end of the day, you look at it and go, what's realistic? What's realistic and what's reasonable is the most obvious. And the most obvious is he stays where he is and retires from Alabama with probably, and I'm going to say this, if he stays 5 more years, he's going to get 2 more. I mean, I don't see how he doesn't.
I don't think that's far-fetched at all.
He won 4 in the last...
To win
right? I mean,
2 in the next 5?
Right? I mean, it's that. In fact, that's probably selling him short. I mean, this is the program he's trying to go, hell, they're saying I can only win 2. I'm getting motivated. So, we might be giving him bulletin board material, but 1 or 2 in the next 5 years? I mean, what do you think that he could do that? I mean, look at the roster he has right now, and look at the recruits he has coming in. There's nobody better. Okay, so he played a bad game against Auburn. Okay, they still won the national championship. And if memory serves me, there haven't been 4 undefeated teams in the playoffs, so he can still lose a game a year for the next 5 years and still aspire to win, 2 or more national championships. And I think that's realistic. Looking at that team and looking at what he has and looking at this kid now. We also had the guy Ohio State 3 years ago had their quarterback come out and do the same thing in the national championship game, and now he's playing wide receiver, right? So, let's not get way ahead of ourselves.
Yeah,
but it was the way this kid played that quarterback position
again,
right against the team.
And people, and I just want people to really really appreciate that college football quarterback and NFL quarterback are 2 totally different quarterbacks. It's not the same thing. If you can play college football quarterback, does not in any way, shape, or form mean that you can be an NFL quarterback. You can win Heisman trophies, which is basically the what they consider the best player in college football for that year, the most popular, whatever you want to call it. That does not mean that you're going to be good in the NFL or decent or even on a team. I mean, there has been several guys in recent history that won Heisman trophies, never even made it in the league.
Well, let's list the guys that didn't win the Heisman Trophy. Okay, let's start in 1998. Okay, Manning didn't win the Heisman Trophy. Brady didn't win the Heisman Trophy. Breeze didn't win the Heisman Trophy. Matt Ryan didn't win the Heisman. I mean, okay, we're naming the elite quarterbacks in the NFL today. Not one of them won the Heisman Trophy.
I don't think Matt.
Right?
Matty Ice is not. He's not elite. He's good. He's not elite. But anyways, I know what you mean.
He's not elite? Oh,
no.
He's top 10. Right? My point taken, though, right? He's, Matthew Stafford. Right? I mean, these are really good quarterbacks, okay? Well, they're, okay. Super Bowl quarterbacks. Aaron Rodgers, he didn't even sniff a Heisman Trophy at Cal, right?
Exactly.
So, points well taken. They're 2 totally different positions. Where's Johnny Manziel? Right? I mean, where are these Heisman Trophy quarterbacks?
Johnny Manziel finalized the contract in the CFL.
which I think is a great move for him, to be quite honest with you.
It's a good
Now,
fit.
Now, to be honest, Carson Palmer did win a Heisman Trophy, and he did have a very long and successful career in the NFL. Okay, there are some guys that have done it, right? But not many, especially the quarterback. The running backs have had more success than the quarterbacks in the NFL in terms of Heisman Trophy winning the quarterbacks. The running backs seem to have had a better run of success if you name some guys, Herschel Walker, Barry Sanders, guys like that. But yeah, your point's well taken. I mean, it's a different position. The reads are different. I mean, think about it. Carson Wentz was an MVP candidate, and he came out of freaking North Dakota State. Really?
Yeah.
Who'd have thought that, right? Right. So that's why you look at the guys in this draft.
Well, I projected Wentz high.
Sam Bradford and Rosen and
I projected Carson Wentz high. But yeah, overall looking at it, usually it's a funny thing is that it's the small school guys that end up being like the guys in the league.
90 seconds.
As far as it's not the football
Romo.
powers that put quarterbacks into the league. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger.
Where was Tony Romo? Northern Illinois?
Yeah,
Northern Illinois.
Look at Brett Favre. What is that?
Ben Roethlisberger,
Southern
Ohio.
Southern Miss?
Brett Favre, Southern Mississippi. Southern Miss, right. I mean, yeah, you can name guy after guy after
60 seconds.
From Grambling, right? I mean,
And then Matt Ryan, where'd he go? Was it ECU?
Boston College.
Or Boston College, yeah. And no, it was Flacco. Flacco was ECU, right? Joe Flacco.
No, Flacco was at Delaware.
Yeah. It's even smaller. Like
even
who was ECU?
Delaware's FCS school.
Who did East Carolina put in?
Garrard, David Garrard.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Okay, was from ECU. And you had a couple Marshall guys. You had Chad Pennington.
Yeah, Pistol Pennington.
Marshall.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you have all these guys and that came
10 seconds.
places you went, Alex Smith from Utah, right? I mean,
yeah.
Utah, that's not a football factory, right? So it's really interesting. The guys from the big colleges, the Colt McCoys from Texas, where's he? All those quarterbacks at the University of Florida had, the Danny Werfels and that kind of guys. All those Heisman Trophy winners from Miami. Now, Vinny Testaverde played a long time in the NFL, okay? He was one of the ones that had some success for Miami, but the rest of them didn't really do too much. So it's really interesting. Really interesting. It's a good point that you have and so it's actually pretty fascinating. Recently, we've had actually more success than in the past. I mean, Jameis Winston's, he and Marcus Mariota both took a little bit of a step back this year, but they still are good quarterbacks. I mean, at least Mariota got to the playoffs. You got Cam Newton, who's had good success at Carolina. Jared Goff, Carson Wentz went 1-2 2 years ago, and they both had playoff teams this year. So maybe the analytics or maybe the scouting is getting better. I don't know what it is, but some of those top quarterbacks the last few years have stuck around more than in the past. And of course that class with was it Rivers, Manning, Brees? Were they all in the same class? Yeah, that was a good class of quarterback. That's no. Manning, Rivers, and Roethlisberger.
Yeah, that was.
That class that class is riding the Elway Kelly Marino class, at least in terms of Super Bowl titles. From back in '83, that was a great class.
I think this is actually a tremendous segue into what we're looking at is the conference championship games this weekend, NFC and AFC. Now,
I was just going to go there. Yep. So I'm going to say right off the top, as we enter this, right off the top, don't sleep on the Jags. I know there's a tendency that they're going into New England. Bortles is
Vegas has them at -9.
Yeah, I'm probably going to. As soon as we get off the phone, I'm probably going to make that bet and go with the Jags. I think they can do the one thing that disrupts the New England Patriots on either side of the ball, and that is they can get to Tom Brady. And that's the only way to beat the Patriots is to get to Tom Brady. You have to get to Tom Brady. And I think they can do that. I really do. Now, it was, that game last week against the Steelers wasn't as close as it turned out at the end because that was a garbage touchdown at the end with, no time left and all that kind of stuff. But they can get to Brady. And Brady only has one weapon. And that's Gronkowski. I mean, a real weapon in terms of, stretching the defense, all that kind of thing. And the running game isn't fantastic.
I think Jacksonville on defense matches up really well. I think they match up really well. I think that secondary that they have,
I think they do too.
From linebackers to safeties to corners, I think again Gronk's their weapon. The Steelers clearly had a lot more to offer and put up against them on the outside than the Patriots do. And their big weapon is Gronkowski. And I think that they have the personnel in place that can fortify that and be able to stand up to whatever he can offer. Now, can they get? I think that they do have a greater than average chance. I'll take them against the league. If you're telling me Jags defensive line getting to Brady against the league, their chances, I'll take them versus the league. I think they're that good. I think they have been a bit underrated, but let's not. I don't think the presence of Tom Coughlin in Jacksonville is a fluke. I don't think that him making the head coaching selection was a fluke. And the success they have are definitely not flukes. So
no accident there. I agree. I totally agree with you. He's brought a winning attitude to the organization. I mean, the guy. Listen, his second season at Jacksonville, the first time around as head coach, they were in the AFC title game. Their second season in the league. Then he goes to New York and wins two Super Bowl titles. Yeah, no accident at all that Jacksonville's exhibiting excellence at this point in time. I am in total agreement, which is, we've agreed a lot tonight. We have to rethink our positions because we're agreeing a lot tonight. We'll have to revisit that for next week, but for tonight we're agreeing a lot.
Yeah, it's kind of an unusual thing, but I think you should agree with me all the time. I'm just saying, it makes sense that you would agree.
Well, I feel the same way that I'm always right, and it just so happens that you're right tonight as well. So that's how that works. But it might be that it's 1 degree here in Arkansas tonight. I mean, it's 1 degree in Arkansas tonight, and that's not Celsius.
Singular.
That is Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
It is cold. Makes me miss my days in Tampa when it was not so cold. But no, I think that I think Coughlin, he's like a second head coach. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't he beat New England twice in the Super Bowl?
Yep.
He did, didn't he?
Yep.
Okay.
Same kind of, I think, if I'm not mistaken, kind of similar odds to what it is right now. I'd have to go back and look. Odds of those Super Bowls.
They were, if I'm not mistaken, they were an 11-point dog the year that New England was undefeated. I want to say it was double digit. Okay, New England came in 18-0. So, there's a lot about this game that leads me to believe. I mean, heck, Jacksonville went into Pittsburgh. Now, granted, Pittsburgh came out flat. Pittsburgh was looking ahead. I know that, but they withstood a furious Pittsburgh comeback in Pittsburgh, and I just think they can get to Brady. And I'm basing this on one thing, and that's all I'm basing it on. Is if I'm Jacksonville, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to sell out on the pass rush, and I'm going to make sure that Gronk is double teamed, and see if that's good enough. See if New England can adjust to that, because Belichick has said he's made it very clear in the past. The one thing that gets them off their game is a pass rush that takes Brady out of the game. Because it's Brady at his age now. This is where his age does come into play. He's never been that mobile, and he certainly isn't mobile now. And if they can get a rush on the edge and force him into that pocket and just hesitate just a little bit, because they've got the secondary to do that. They can take away that passing game. I mean, Roethlisberger clearly had problems finding open guys, in the defensive backfield, and he was, and Roethlisberger's way more difficult to deal with, to bring down than Brady is. Brady just collapses, and so I'll be interested to see what the first couple series are like, what that looks like on Sunday, with that pass rush of Jacksonville. How they come after Brady. That to me will be the story of the game. If Brady stands back there and carves him up for the first couple series, game over. But if Jacksonville gets to him a couple times, I think that's going to be a pretty big indication of how that game's going to go.
Now, on the other,
you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is getting crazy. Okay, so now here's one that I don't know if we're going to be able to agree on this or not. The Vikings and the Eagles. The Eagles, like I said, when Winston went down and Foles stepped up, I said Eagles can still make it to the Super Bowl. And I've stood by that, and I think the Eagles can win this game against the Vikings. Obviously, they're going to go to Philadelphia. They're favorites here. They had that seed. You win enough games early enough, you got a top seed. So they get that. So it's going to be in Philly. It's a tough place to play. That Eagles defense is better than the Saints defense they just saw, because the Eagles defense can get to the quarterback much easier, and that's the division. Your Redskins are in that division. We saw what happened when they played this year, but this Vikings team is a bit interesting. I mean, they have a rookie of the year contender at wide receiver, and then a guy that probably would have been more good. He won't be playing, but I mean that's saying Dalvin Cook didn't play. It's funny. I didn't get the article finished in time, but with the Rookie of the Year candidates, this was literally the year of the rookie running back. Had it not been for Cook having an injury, a couple weeks in, I mean, we probably would have had all of them as Rookie of the Year candidates, But that still, that being said, I'm favoring the Eagles in this game against the Vikings. Case Keenum has played above and beyond what was thought of him and above what was expected of him. But I think Nick Foles, as we progress through these few games, getting more first-team reps, he's able to provide more to the team in this offense, similar to the year that he was a Pro Bowl. So I think he's getting better and sharper over the last few weeks. So it's helped. I favor the Eagles in this game over the Vikings.
Well, I do too. I think we forget that Nick Foles was 27 touchdowns, 5 interceptions the year it was something like that the year he was really good, and I think the Eagles are the most complete team in football, and I think that the Vikings are probably second. But this game's in Philadelphia. It's going to be outside now. The weather's not going to be bad. I think it's going to be in the upper 40s or something like that. Maybe a little bit of precipitation, but nothing major.
Yeah.
But I mean, if I do what I do in my college picks, where I'm usually 80 some percent, I'm going to take the Philadelphia offense and say where are they versus the Minnesota offense. I actually think that the Vikings offense is better. Foles is at least as good as Keenum, right? I mean, I think that's probably
fair.
A little bit in Foles' favor, actually. Okay, good rushing game, good running game. The Philadelphia defense, look what they did to the Falcons last week was ridiculous. I mean, the Falcons got nothing, and I don't think the Vikings are as good as the Falcons on offense. So I'm giving the nod to Philadelphia as well, because I think I don't think it was such a big come from Wentz to Foles. I just don't, because the reason is because I think Peterson was able to do most of the same things with Foles. The only thing he couldn't do was Foles doesn't do as well outside the pocket as Wentz does. I mean, Wentz is a big kid, he's young, and he can get outside the pocket and throw on the run. But from a play calling perspective, they didn't really have to do anything different. Maybe they get Ajayi a little bit more involved in the offense, which is a good thing, right? I mean, why not get your running game going? You got two good running backs in Philadelphia now. Why not get them both? So I just think it's going to be 16-13, 17-12. I don't know. Pick your score. I'm not sure the winner gets to 20, and so I think that's going to favor Philly because mean that Foles doesn't have to get in a shootout. I think if the score gets up, I think that favors Minnesota though, because I think they get in the outside and they can do some things with that offense that the Vikings can be more explosive. But
yeah,
I like Philadelphia. The thing is, for me, whichever team wins, Minnesota or Philadelphia, it'll be a great story because neither of those teams has been to the Super Bowl, very much. The Eagles went with McNabb, and that was the game where he kind of fell apart at the end of the game, and the Patriots beat him. But neither of these teams has had a lot of success at the playoff and Super Bowl level in 30 some odd years. So it'll be a great story, whichever one happens. Of course, if Minnesota wins, it'll be the first time that a host team will, be in the Super Bowl. So part of me is pulling for Minnesota just because I have no dog in the hunt just to see that happen. I mean, think about that. A team playing on their home field in the Super Bowl, which never happens. It hasn't even come close to happening. But I think the trend continues. I don't think the host team gets in. I think Philadelphia is going to get in, and then the question is going to be, what can the Eagles with Nick Foles do in the Super Bowl? Because there have been backup quarterbacks take teams to Super Bowl in the past. Most notably with the Giants, Hofstadler, and he won it. So we'll have to see, but that's getting ahead of ourselves. But I like Eagles, and I'll tell you, I'm definitely going to bet on the Jags to cover the 9, but I like them outright. I absolutely like them outright, just because I think it's a bad matchup for the Patriots.
Yeah, I think we definitely could see Jaguars, Eagles in the Super Bowl. I don't know if I could say that the Jaguars couldn't win that too. So, but we'll save that for next week on that line. I did want to get. I might get into it, talk a little bit more about it next week. With the Shrine game, I'll have a podcast on that. So, what do you make of this of the Shrine game this year? You gonna watching it? I know there's some Hokies in there.
I might watch it if it's at a good time. I'm not a particularly big fan of or watching those games. I think they're entertaining to a certain extent. I think the main importance of those games is for the college coaches. The professional coaches who, frankly, they get no time to watch these college athletes during the season because they're so busy, right? They're doing their own thing with the pros. I mean, they're consumed with their own games. So I think at the micro level, it gives them an opportunity to see the players during practice, to see those guys play. I think the game's less important than the practice time, and I know you've spent some time at some of these games at the practices and leading up to those. And so I think it's more important the exposure they get prior to the game, and so I don't watch a lot of it because frankly I've turned the corner now to college basketball and to golf. As you know, I've made more of a commitment to cover PGA golf this year, so I'll probably be doing more of that. But yeah, and there are a lot of Hokies in these games because it was a pretty senior late team, especially on defense. But there's the East West Shrine game, there's the Senior Bowl, a couple others, I believe.
Yeah, they have the All-American Bowl.
The Senior Bowl, of course, is
the Tropical Bowl.
Yeah. Now the Senior Bowl is only for players that play their eligibility, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a little bit more exclusive of the others. I think if you've committed to the draft, I think you can play. I think the real important there is for the pro scouts and the pro coaches to get some exposure to these kids. That's a good thing, right? Because you want these kids to have as much exposure as they can get. They're taking a new step in their life. They're turning the corner. They're becoming professionals, and they should get that opportunity. So I applaud that. But as a spectator, that's not something that I'm particularly involved in. I used to watch a game. It hasn't been around for many years, but there was a game on Christmas Day called the Blue-Gray game. Took place in I think it was someplace in might have been Montgomery, Alabama, or I don't know, Jackson, somewhere down there. And it was all the guys from the teams that didn't get in the bowls. But remember, that was when there weren't 78 bowl games. There were like 12. And so the non-bowl game participants got to play in this game on Christmas Day. And that was kind of a cool game because they were trying to make it was their only chance to really, get any publicity in front of pro scouts. And so that was an interesting game. It was on Christmas, and it was the only game on Christmas. So I used to watch that. But other than that, I haven't spent a lot of time watching the All-Star games.
I know. I think this is probably one of I really do enjoy this part because this is where you get guys that are exceptional from the college game that are in that process of transitioning into the pro game. And it's a time to where you can see guys up close and really see their skills up in the open because they're working with a coach that they haven't worked with before. They're an NFL coach. You literally have all the scouts there, at least early in the week. The broadcast people later in the week, because the thing is, the next weekend will be the Senior Bowl. So the more touted guys that did make it to eligibility end up playing in the Senior Bowl. It's a tier above. The Shrine Game, I believe, has been around longer. And actually, the thing is, I haven't got the notification back of when it will be, but I'm looking to have some time with Brett Favre because he's being inducted into the Shrine Game Hall of Fame this year. So, work out some time to talk to him briefly if I'm able to. I know he's a pretty sought after guy, but he'll be there. He'll be inducted into the Shrine Game Hall of Fame this week. I'll be down there tomorrow, and it's a practice tomorrow, but it's time to where you can talk to guys and look at what direction you might see them going in. And it's crazy to see, like last year, like literally guys looking at because I like doing the scouting. I like the talent evaluation side of it and seeing what they would be at the next level and making my understanding of that. So it's a process thing. I'm a processes guy. I like the process. So this is part of that. But just seeing them, again, a lot of them they're inside their element but outside their comfort zone in some ways. And all of them are trying to impress and do their best. But you can really see the difference between the guys that are in the NFL and the guys that are trying to get into the NFL. Like even on the practice squads, it is such a big jump to play in the NFL, and you can see guys are really rough around the edges at times. There's things that they got to work on, especially the smaller school guys, and those are guys that you don't get to see most of the year, So that's why I do enjoy being able for the same reason some people enjoy watching the bowl games. I enjoy being at these prospect games, these all-star games, if you want to call it, because again, it does add a different perspective to what is being offered, and you see more into it because, again, it's not the same offense. They're not in a system that they were in college. You get to see more of their raw talent. How can they make that jump to the next level? So.
Well, we had Lee Steinberg on this time last year talking about,
boy, has he signed guys this year.
I think, yeah, he has. I mean, that's just because he had Patrick Mahomes last year, which I think, which really got him, back in the game. And he puts his guys through this incredible 3-month, and he talked about how much money he spends personally.
Yeah.
Right. On getting these guys ready for the NFL. I think if I remember correctly, it's like $30,000-$40,000 a guy out of Lee Steinberg's pocket, right? Betting on the come. But obviously through his career, he's been very successful doing that. So that jump from college to pro isn't like, oh, well, I'm just a really good player, I'm just going to take the next step. I mean, you look at guys skipping bowl games. I mean, last year Christian McCaffrey didn't play, Fournette didn't play, and you look at their success in the NFL. They've got that jump on getting that stuff done. So that's a great process. And of course you're in a location in the country where you can see some of these things. I'm stuck here in the middle of Arkansas. I can't get to some of these games as easily. So. I agree. I think the real fascinating part would be the part during the week, the week up to the play up to the game, all the practices and the sessions where the players have a chance to interact with. You're right, coaches that have different styles or different schemes, or just different from what they've been through for the last 4 years. I think that'd be fascinating as well. I just haven't had the opportunity to engage in that.
Well, we'll work on that moving forward, but I know I'm really looking forward to the game. Again, these are those things that you can't really look at it and say, I see this team winning for sure, because again, they're brand new coaches that none of them have worked with before. That they're outside of systems that they've really been in before, so it's a lot of newness for everybody involved. The last topic I wanted to get into tonight was on boxing, and I may hold off on that. I might hold off on that. Just to kind of let people know. So the fight that is happening, just kind of a preview, it's happening Saturday night, is Errol Spence Jr., who is the IBF welterweight champion, against Lamont Peterson, who is a welterweight contender. Is supposed to be, they're shaping this up as the fight to potentially shape the welterweight division moving forward. I don't look at it the same way. Errol Spence Jr. is in a completely different league. He's a natural welterweight. Lamont Peterson his success, and all of his success has came at 140 pounds at junior welterweight. 7 pounds makes a pretty big difference when it comes to this sport. And I think the best of Lamont Peterson was at 140, the same way it was with several other boxers that made that move up. So I think it'll be an interesting fight. I'm definitely going to watch it. James will be there. James Bell, our boxing editor and host of the Boxing Source, will be there. He previewed the fight last night on the or Sunday night on the show, the Boxing Source show. So check that out here on Blog Talk or over on the chtonsports.com on the listen link. But the fight, and just so you guys know, my source with Terrence Crawford has told me that they're to finalizing this deal and everything. So Terrence Crawford will likely fight Jeff Horn for a welterweight title in Australia on ESPN in April. I don't have all the details, but that's about as close as you're going to get at this point. As soon as I have more of them, I'll let you know. that fight is going to be huge because Jeff Horn is the guy that beat Pacquiao in the upset victory there. He's defended the title once, and now looking at Terrence Crawford moving up in weight. He is a linear, undisputed, undefeated light welterweight champion. He has every belt, major belt in the division. Moving up, he's good. He'll be fine at 147. He moves. His power seems to go up as he goes up in weight, which is a good sign. So that's my little preview on boxing. Kevin, as far
hey Matthew, I will say this. I'm not a huge. I don't watch a lot of boxing, but I've been watching more. But I will say this: that Jeff Horn victory over Pacquiao was a travesty. It was about one of those ridiculously bad decisions I've ever seen. I watched that fight, and I've been watching boxing for 50 years, and that was ridiculous. And I know people disagree, but that was such a homer call. Horn down in Australia, his home boxing rink, and Pacquiao got hosed. I mean, he dominated the fight, and I was incredulous when I watched that outcome of that fight, and that's what's wrong with boxing. And I know James might, he's a big boxing guy, but it's that night I actually watched a boxing match and went, wow, I could get into boxing. And then when that happened, I went, I'm not sure I could get into a sport where somebody so ridiculously wins. It would be like last week saying, well, after the first quarter, Pittsburgh looked really better than Jacksonville, so we're gonna give Jacksonville the win because they looked better the last three quarters. I mean, we're gonna give the Steelers the win because they looked better the last three quarters than Jacksonville did. So we're just gonna overlook the fact that Jacksonville won on the scoreboard, and we're just gonna put Pittsburgh to the next round. That's what that felt like to me. So anyway, I'll just say that.
I get there's a lot of and that's one of the kind of like football has the individual polls. You have the rankings in the different WBA, WBC, IBF, IBO, stuff like that. So that's kind of like the polls. And then you have the judging. Again, that comes down to like the referees, because you get one referee that's in one point and another referee in another point, and unfortunately the judges can't converse over what they thought they saw like referees can, but it's kind of, it adds to a certain entertainment factor of it. Unfortunately with boxing, those sort of things with the judges turn people off, make them not want to watch it. And as far as football, it just makes people mad and want to throw stuff at the screen. So again, it's a very similar sort of scenario. But the thing is about boxing that makes it tough, and this is kind of the trouble of a lot of individual sports, is being able to find enough individuals that all compete at a high enough level and be able to them to be marketable. That's the tough thing about individual sports, it's tough. I mean, even in golf, how many guys out there are truly marketable guys in golf? None of them were like Tiger, just like none of them have been like Mayweather. But that's it too. A lot of them get sponsorships and get known for as a golfer, but how many people are able to capture that true popularity in the fashion that even similar to what Tiger did? I mean, who can you think in the golfing world is anywhere close to that?
But what's that have to do with reading a fight for Jeff Horn? I mean, to basically manipulate the results where somebody clearly didn't win.
Well, I don't think the fight was manipulated. It's just that, I mean, people see this is one of the troubles with boxing. When you have a guy, this is a similar situation. What happened with Pacquiao in this fight was what happened with Vasyl Lomachenko against Orlando Salido. If you go back and watch that fight, Salido's an active puncher, and that's what Jeff Horn was. He's a very active puncher. So throwing a lot of punches, even if they don't land, it makes it seem like they're controlling around or they can get points. So if the fighter is throwing a lot of punches, you're behind them, you can't see if they're landing or not. So you might be scoring punches land or giving them credit for an offensive attack that really is being nullified by the other fighter's defense, or you're not seeing maybe some points that are being scored on the inside or it's blocked from your view that the other fighter is scoring. So that's the thing is a drawback for defensive fighters and defense in this sort of situation. You can't. The vantage point of the judges aren't all the same. So they do see different fights. So just like that's why I said it's similar to like how you have a sideline judge and you have a backfield judge. They may be looking at the same guy at the same time, but one or neither of them know if he stepped out of bounds or not. It's just unfortunately in boxing they don't have that sort of a replay to go back and look at it like that, like they would if somebody stepped out. So, but boxing is again, it's scored in that fashion. Now, I think there's some remedies. I think, like they've done with some Olympic sports, they could add 2 more judges in there because that again, it still could come out in a draw, but adding 2 more judges makes it so, you have a more definite median number, what you're coming to. It should be more average, more balanced on what everyone would see, So there are some things that boxing can do. I think also making sure that people know who they are. That's the other thing too. It's a draw to the sport as well. Because if there's a draw, if Pacquiao has a draw the way he should have a draw, Pacquiao probably doesn't fight Jeff Horn. Pacquiao's probably fighting Mayweather again. But he doesn't have the same draw. He had to go there because that's the only way he would pull that kind of crowd and that revenue outside fighting Mayweather. But he's diminished too much, and Mayweather doesn't see the revenue upside in it and fighting again. So and a lot of people were turned off from the first fight. So there you have it. He fights Jeff Horn, and he loses. Because, again, one judge scored him winning. The other judge scored Pacquiao winning. And then there was a slight edge out on the other card for Horn. So it was a majority decision. It wasn't even a full decision. It was a majority decision. So that's the tough part.
Well, I believe, and I've been watching, as I said, I've been watching boxing for over 50 years, and I remember the glory days with Ali, Frazier, and Foreman, and Norton, and the heavyweights, and back through the time. But the sport right now is in such disarray, and it's a crooked sport. I think, let me put it this way. It is perceived by the general sporting public as a crooked sport. And that fight did nothing to help that impression, and that's why boxing is not relevant in the sporting world. Now, sure, you have certain bouts that have traded interest, Mayweather, Pacquiao, and Mayweather, O'Connor, but that wasn't even that was a legitimate boxing match in my estimation. But you've got promoters who run the sport. The rankings are a sham. You have matches for what are potentially world championships that are not world championship matches. There's no organization within the sport. There's no real unification of titles. There's no rationality to how boxers are ranked and who boxes. So I mean, think about it. Think about if the football was like that, and it was up to the owners to decide who plays who and how much money they get and what stadium they play in. I mean, what a sham! That's not a sport. That's a spectacle.
That's Jerry Jones's goal.
That's not a sport.
I mean, if you want to look at that, I mean, look at what boxing is and how Bob Arum or Al Hammond control that, Eddie Hearns, and look at what Jerry Jones. I mean, the situation, the Cowboys he controls there, the 49ers he controls there. He's going to have control over the Raiders.
But he doesn't. But the organization of sport itself protects the sport from those very people, and boxing doesn't. Boxing encourages that kind of behavior. I mean, yes, Jerry Jones doesn't get to set his own schedule. The league sets a schedule, and he has to abide by what the league goes by, and who is that? Because he's minimized. He's only 3,200s, and there's an organization, there's a structure, and there's rules. Boxing has no such thing, and so from a sports perspective, I mean, from a fan perspective, okay. I mean, how do you rationalize that to somebody and say this is what makes sense. This is what this is all about. This is how I can understand who plays who and who boxes who and what the results are and what that means for the next one. Blah blah blah. So there's none of that. I mean, none of that. But boxing is also taking themselves out of the public consciousness by there's no boxing on television now. ESPN's trying to make a comeback. And the one boxing match that I think a lot of people watched, which was in fact the Horn-Pacquiao match, they had an opportunity to actually reintroduce themselves into the mainstream of sport with people because it was on ESPN. People were watching, and the outcome was so far removed from what we saw with our eyes. Now I know you can talk about angles of judges, you can talk about all sorts of things, Matthew, but the fact that there was the guy who. The better boxer didn't win that match and didn't get the judges in his favor for whatever reason. I happen to think it was a fix. I think Pacquiao got paid a lot of money. He didn't give a crap if he won or not. Didn't make any difference. It was a lot of money. You get to promote a guy from Australia. You get to promote Jeff Horn. And now you got a new name in the game. Pacquiao's near the end of his career. I got all that. Okay, and so the fix was in. Now Horn wins. He gets to make the next step and he gets to fight for a title. So that's the perception I have, and that's probably the perception a lot of people have. And so, why should I watch another one? Because to me, it's no better than WWE.
But that's the thing is like
another exhibition,
like where Pacquiao losing that fight isn't advantageous for Al Hammond or Bob Arum for Top Rank, which are both managed and promoted by. It's not advantageous for them. Jeff Horn beating Pacquiao and then having a warm-up fight doesn't do anything for him. That hurts him more because the bigger fight is him having this good payday against Jeff Horn, then Jeff Horn going on to beat somebody else, not named Pacquiao, and then Pacquiao fighting Terrence Crawford, and those are the two top guys. That match was the match that was the moneymaker for them. So Pacquiao losing, and again, I think he got screwed out of it. My card said something different that I put out, but then again, the judges came back differently, and I think I do agree. I think he got screwed. But there's a bunch of other matches we can go back and it is what it is. The divisions, again, boxing does have a lot of mess and a lot of clutter that they need to clean up. I don't think that they have any sort of way that how they think that they can proactively and productively do it, but they're going to keep moving forward with whatever they can do. But Pacquiao, having a fix there for Pacquiao to lose to Horn doesn't make any sense. Before Horn beats Pacquiao, He isn't anybody. And then after Horn loses to Crawford, he isn't anybody again. He's just a guy that got lucky and got a decision against Pacquiao when everybody thinks Pacquiao won. He'll be a forgotten guy, in the long scheme of things. People end up talking about that.
Which is my point. Which is my point. They can't even get their fixes right. They can't even fix it so that the sport is so broken. My point is, it's a broken sport, right? Because they can't even fix it right.
Well, the sport isn't broken. The governing around the sport is broken.
No, the sport's not. Yes, because I love boxing. I love watching a good boxing match. Okay, I really do. I always have. I think it's the misunderstanding of the physical toll it takes to hold your gloves up with that many ounces of weight on your hands for 10 rounds is incredible. Ask anybody to try that for 3 minutes, just one round. Get through one round. Don't even get hit.
Here's something. Just do this.
It's so misunderstood. I get that.
Next time you go to the gym, you don't even have to go to the gym. You can just stand there, and you don't even have to hit anything. So just stand up, go to the mirror, and look in the mirror, and put your phone on 3 minutes, a 3-minute alarm, 3 minutes, right? And then you just go straight forward to full extension, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. Just keep going, right, left, right, left. Don't go super fast. Don't go slow. Just consistent, right, left. If you do that for 3 minutes, you're going to notice towards the end of 3 minutes, it's going to be really tough to keep your arms up. They do that 12 times, but throwing a lot more punches and getting hit and having to get out of the way.
No, listen. But that goes back to why I was so upset at boxing for botching that particular opportunity for them to bring the sport back into the mainstream. Because obviously, we know that mixed martial arts is overtaking them in great leaps and bounds, right?
No, actually, the numbers are pretty even across the board.
Okay, but
the money is way higher in boxing.
MMA was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, but take where MMA was 10 years ago in terms of popularity. Because I'm not an MMA guy, but I can tell you that it's pretty tough for two guys inside a cage, one beating the crap out of the other with no holds barred. That's pretty hard to fake, right? It's hard. It's pretty easy to see who wins because the loser doesn't get up. Yeah. And I think we're boxing. I mean, I was a big advocate. Just staying there until somebody doesn't get up. This whole judging thing, forget that crap. Right? Just put two guys in the ring, and when the guy doesn't come out for the bell, fight's over. That's it. That's how it used to be, and that's when boxing gained a great popularity in the 50s. So, they had 15-round heavyweight fights. 15 rounds, dude. They really went the distance because somebody wasn't coming out for the 14th round, or 13th round, or 15th round. But my point being that regardless of whether you agree with the decision or not, I think I can say with confidence that boxing missed a great opportunity with that bout to reinstitute itself into some mainstream, and they botched it, which is just how boxing is. They botched it for 30 years. And they're trying to get back, but they haven't. And I think I speak for a lot of people. I don't think I'm alone. I watched that bout. I haven't. That's the first boxing bout I watched. And good gosh, I think the last one I watched was Tyson Holyfield in '97. So I mean, it's been 20 years since I sat down and really watched one. Was interested in, because I don't do pay-per-view. I'm not paying $100 to watch a bout. I'm not. And so I can say I think they botched one. Now, I understand. Maybe Horn won it. Maybe he didn't. It didn't look like it to me. It didn't look it to a lot of people that he won that fight. And that decision was a shocker. I was like, oh, this thing's over. And there you go. So I'm just saying that's boxing has some work to do. Because I'm not going to blog about it. I'm not putting it out there. because I don't think it's relevant, because I think the organization isn't there. The boxing themselves are great, and Olympic boxing, amateur boxing is wonderful, but until you give me a reason to watch, I'm having a hard time carve out my time to watch something, because the landscape for spectator sports is awfully crowded right now, and they're getting crowded out.
Well, okay. On that note, I mean, we're about 5 minutes left in the show. What are we looking at as far as the PGA Tour? What do we have to look for golf here?
I tell you,
in the next couple months.
Well, a young man over the weekend in Hawaii, Patton Kizzire, just won his second PGA Tour event of this season, which, by the way, began in October. They have a wraparound season, so he won his second event. We have as opposed to boxing, we have a wonderful crop of young, popular, good athletes that are playing golf right now. And you can go with Dustin Johnson, number one in the world. You go with Jordan Spieth, probably at the moment considered the most accomplished player. You've got Rory McIlroy coming off injury from last year. You got Justin Thomas, last year's Player of the Year and FedEx Cup champion, as well as PGA champ. So you have these great stories around golf, and then just to top it off, this is like the cherry on top of the whipped cream on top of the icing on top of the cake is the return of Tiger Woods and what that might mean to the tour. And I've written a lot about the impact of Tiger Woods, and I know you've syndicated a number of my articles on the impact of Tiger Woods on TV ratings, et cetera. And so golf at the pro level, at that level, is very strong. What's not happening is it's not translating down to the playing level and the course level and the revenue generation from balls and clubs and things like that. So that's a different story. That's the business side of golf. But from the actual PGA Tour perspective, it is a boom time for the PGA Tour in particular. Lots of good Americans, lots of good young players, attractive, and that's this is entertainment. That makes a difference. These guys, Ricky Fowler, Jordan Spieth, Justin Thomas, Kevin Kisner. I mean, there was a site last week where Justin Thomas from Alabama and Kevin Kisner from Georgia had a bet on the national championship game on the 17th hole on Friday. Kevin Kisner had to walk up the fairway with a Alabama jersey on, so had his name on the back. And so when they got done, they asked Kevin Kisner, "What are you going to do with the jersey?" He said, "Well, Justin Thomas has given it to me, and I'm going to raffle it off, and all the proceeds are going to my foundation for kids." Now, it doesn't get much better than that, right? I mean, these are guys taking an opportunity to give back to charity. The PGA Tour just passed $2.5 billion in charity donations. Last year, they gave a record $186 million to charity through their events. This is a great organization, headed in the right direction. And so I would urge people to watch if they haven't had a chance to watch the tournament. But Tiger will be back January 25th in San Diego, and we're looking forward to the season. So I will be contributing a lot this year to golf. I've focused on that. I will be covering golf tournaments. I'll be attending several later in the year, and I think that's a good teaser for the season and the PGA Tour.
Well, I look forward to us talking more about that each week in a segment on the show. So just familiarizing our listener base more on the world of golf, because I think golf is one of those sports, again, it's a single player team sport, and I think with the economy boosting up, I think with the cost of living kind of coming down, some of the deflation coming in, like consumer goods and spendings, obviously golf is more of a luxury sport. It costs a lot of money to golf. If you golf on any sort of a semi-regular basis, it can get pretty expensive. So I think with this cost and stuff like that coming down, I just think that some of the manufacturers, they've gotten so much into bigger, longer, broader scopes of how are they the best. I think once they figure out how to get back to basics and getting involved with people and targeting their consumers a bit more on a bit more microeconomic level instead of trying to affect it,
Well, let me jump in real quickly and give you a company that's doing a lot of good things. Do you have a Top Golf in Tampa? Yeah,
I believe so.
You know what Top Golf is?
Yeah.
Okay, for any of your listeners, if you want to get started in golf, go to Top Golf. It is like golf meets video game. It is a Target Golf. It's an entertainment venue, restaurant, bar, sports bar kind of place where you get to hit golf balls, and it is pulling millions of people into the game. It is awesome thing. It's not playing a golf course, but it is so much fun. If people who never played golf, go out there, grab a golf club, hit a couple golf balls, and you will love it.
I did in broadcasting school. I did a stand-up piece, so it was a sports stand-up piece, and then I had to do a commercial, and I did it. Actually, it was on a top. It was a company. It was like Top Golf, in Tampa. It was
Thank you for using
one
Blog
of the
Talk
few.
Radio.
So
Goodbye.
I agree. It's awesome. Well, thank you all. That's the end of the show for this week. Thank you for tuning in. Check back in next week. If you haven't had a chance to download the Spreaker app, please do download the Spreaker app. It's free. You can hear the whole 3 hours of the show unabated, as well as the podcasted versions too. So that's all I got for you this week. I'm out. Peace.